Kinetics has been made in association with Road Race Parts. Top quality, best prices, no compromise. Head to roadraceparts.com to get parts for your racing vehicles now.
Hello, welcome to a new episode of Velocity Kinetics today. Sorry about the delays between posts. It's just been crazy busy work-wise and just in personal lives. But I posted on the Facebook page a little while ago about doing a video about how important it is that a car dealer does you good whenever you see them, and how that helps, shall I put it, helps you reaffirm your faith either in the brand or in the dealership chain, or just if you bought privately, then you reaffirmed your faith in buying privately. Now, most of this is going to be stories about my experience and one particular dealer that I've had. If this video makes it to them, this has been completely voluntary. I have not been asked to do this or been offered any sort of financial recompense for making such a video. Although if you could write off my finance, that'd be nice. Please. Anyway, if you're buying a new car, for the most part it'll come from a chain or a certain dealership. For instance, Stoneacre, you've got Suzuki, you've got Volvo, you've got BMW, you've got Volkswagen, etc., in their chain. Sesson-Lata down in Bury St Edmunds, you've got Volvo, you've got Hyundai. Sorry about that, it was got a phone call. Anyway, what was I saying? If a dealer does a good job for you when you buy a car, chances are you're going to go back and use them again. And it doesn't matter where you're from: England, Wales, Scotland, America, Europe, Asia, Australia. If the dealer does a good job for you, you're going to go back. And it's not just about the buying experience, because you've also got technically the selling experience if you trade your car in, and you've got the service experience if you choose to stay with the main dealer for your service supply. I have bought through Stoneacre Suzuki in Middlesbrough twice. I encouraged my sister to go there, based on the experience I'd had. She bought a Suzuki Swift. My dad has been a long-termer at Sesson-Lata Volvo in Bury St Edmunds. But he's also bought from Pilling, which is Milton Keynes, and he also bought from one near Framlingham. My friend Mikey's had a lease through Stoneacre Ford down in York. My brother's considering Sesson-Lata Seat for his car, or he might consider a Bury St Edmunds or Norwich branch of Suzuki or Honda. My parents have gone back to a Ford dealership in Thetford 3 times. You know, it's all about what the dealership does and how they can do it. When I bought my first car, I hadn't gone to Suzuki first time. My manager at the time said her daughter had gotten a car through Volkswagen. I believe it was a Lookers Volkswagen. And she'd said because I was over 21, I'd probably get the free insurance, which would have been a bonus for me. Didn't have to pay out insurance for a year, no road tax. Woohoo! What could possibly go wrong? Everything, apparently. The dealership I went to was Lookers Volkswagen in Middlesbrough. Sales room, nicely laid out, full of cars that I wanted and couldn't afford, or wouldn't have said no to. I've always been a bit against buying German myself, because you pay a lot more on Volkswagens and BMWs. You pay a lot more for a German car than you would do for anything Japanese or European. By the time you've paid for the badge, you might as well have saved yourself. You might as well just set fire to £3,000 or money, a certain amount of money in that order. So I went to VW, test drove a Polo Blue Motion 1 litre. It's alright, only 60 PS, 5 doors though, seat was quite comfortable, the steering wheel was quite nice, sales lady was alright, she had to keep checking things with the sales manager. I could only put up £150 deposit for the car. I could have possibly waited a bit longer for a car, but I'd had a couple of days where I finished work at 7 o'clock, and when I used to get the train back from where I worked in Stockton, then I finished at 7, the train wasn't until 20 to 8, if it turned up on time at all. And then I still had a mile and a half walk back to my flat, which I didn't mind the walk. Sometimes a good way to let off a bit of steam, play a bit of Queen, you know, decompress. But maybe I'd rashly jumped into the car buying malarkey. So they went away to see what they could do. Now, they had to go away and put the sales application through, and I couldn't get a decision for 2 days. My credit file at the time was not fantastic. I'd just recovered from a few screw-ups, shall we put it, as a student, and made headway in sorting those out. So it was less than ideal, but I'd been honest and upfront with them from the start. The sale fell through, basically, because they said they wouldn't give me the finance. I'd gone away and I then went away and said, well, can you put it through on my partner's name? Like, yeah, sure, okay, whatever. That went away, and they said, yep, that's good, you've done it, you've got the car. Fantastic. I bought some insurance for it through Bell, which is a division of Admiral. Interestingly, they wanted a black box on the vehicle. Don't know why. So I went back to them and they said, well, you can't have got insurance already. And like, yeah, I did. Got a quote, paid for it, so on and so forth. And said, well, who's the registered owner? Like, I've put myself down as the registered owner. There was this big old back and forth between me, the finance guy, and the sales manager. He goes, well, we've done everything we can, and to be honest, you're not being the sort of customer that you want, that we would like. That's the undertone of what his message was. I don't remember it. I'm sure I've probably long deleted the email. But I recently discovered the sales invoice, and they charged me for the red paint that they said they were giving me for free. So, probably dodged quite a bullet there. But I was absolutely furious with VW after that. But that had taken about a week to unfold. But on the day when I'd agreed to buy the VW, out of curiosity, we had to go into Middlesbrough, and it was only a short walk from where the VW dealership is into the middle of Middlesbrough for where we needed to be for something else. So I stopped at Renault on the way back there, because it's halfway between the town centre and where VW was. I test drove a Clio. Sarah didn't like the Clio very much. It was alright. Clutch was a bit difficult to get used to. The VW, I had an easier time in the VW than I did in the Clio. Not probably just the fact that I'd been used to an old style Clio Campus with my driving instructor down in Thetford when I'd been learning, when I'd still lived there. A guy called Ben Drew, very good. I'd recommend him if you're in the area. He said he could do the Renault for about 194, which is what I'd kind of agreed to pay for the VW, give or take a pound or two. I said, well, I have to see how things go with the VW. I hadn't even agreed to buy the VW. I said I was thinking about it. I'll give it some thought, because we'd looked at possibilities for Twingo, and I looked at it like, actually, that's far too small for me. Looked at the possibility of a Megane, but maybe that was far too much car for what we needed at the time. So went away and we left it as it was. So the VW fell through. In the meantime, I'd found a couple of Volvos at Mill Volvo in Stockton. I'd emailed the dealership about it, explained my situation, and said, yeah, sure, we'll see what we can do. Now, as a new driver, realistically, with hindsight, I shouldn't have gone to Volvo. Not that Volvo's a bad car to buy, but when a Volvo goes wrong, usually it costs quite a lot of money to fix based on what my parents have had with their Volvos in the past. I'd originally looked at and agreed to buy an S40, 1.6 diesel S40. That fell through because he went to go put the reservation fee on it. It's like, that's been sold, and no one had updated the dealer's used car list. Like, oh, it's fine. That blue C30. It was a 58 plate blue C30. I was a bit about it because it was newish, as in maybe 5 years old maximum. But whoever had it had slapped the miles on it quite hard. It had about 120,000 miles on it. So I was obviously worried about timing belts, exhausts, cat converters, and like, which are not cheap to replace, whether you go through the dealership or not. But in the end, I was like, I need some wheels. No one said I had to keep the Volvo forever. So I'd agreed to buy that, took the £100 booking fee off me. Same thing again, I'd been gazumped. Someone else had bought it. And annoyingly, someone else had just bought it in the time I was paying my £100. So we found another C30, a little bit more expensive, but it was a bit older, but with fewer miles on it. So I think the blue C30 I'd agreed to buy was an SE Lux. This one was just an SE, I believe, an S or an SE. It was a grade down, but it had about 80,000 miles on it, opposed to the 100 and odd that the other one had. I went to put my £100 fee on again, and the car had been sold to the son of the person who owns the Mill Volvo Group. So I said, he just refunded my £100, went tail between his legs, and like, I'm so sorry about this, it does not happen. Like, it's alright, mate, it's alright, it's fantastic, it's fine. You know, I give him a bit of slack because it's not his fault. He then went away, and he said, well, would you consider a new car or a lease? And I'm like, well, possibly. I'd like to have the winter pack on it, because Volvo heat seats, oh my god, they're amazing. I haven't tried them in any other car, because my current car doesn't have them. But there were some V40s coming in on lease. £199 deposit, £199 a month. But I can't remember, there's something else I had to pay for, which I just didn't have the money for, and they wouldn't take a credit card for it. So this guy, he really pulled out all the stops to try and sort it out for me. He managed to get Volvo to go the other way on the fee, citing the chew on we'd had with the 3-4 Volvos I'd previously agreed to buy. So they waived that fee, but then the stickling point came to the mileage, because I didn't know. I've got family members who are not very well, and I might possibly need to hightail it down to see them at a moment's notice. The sticking point was the mileage, and it was how much extra they wanted to charge per mile. But when he got it all to, the thing is, when the guy from Mill had gone to Volvo, he managed to get them to agree on a 6,000 miles a year basis. 6,000 miles is pretty good, but when I signed off sick at the end of 2015, when I was looking to purchase, I really slapped the miles on because I was just driving here, there, and everywhere to get out the house. I had that sort of thing had never crossed my mind. But I was like, well, I might need to put more on, you see. And the guy's like, well, you can change the agreement, but it'll put your payments up. And then if we went to 8,000, that would suddenly nearly double the payment. I think it took up to, from 199, it took up to something like 230, 240, which at the time I couldn't just justify. And then we were back around to that age-old argument. It's a Volvo, it's quite expensive. But this was on a personal contract lease, the V40. So some of the expenses would have been covered. In the end, I decided not to go Volvo. It was probably a bit of a stretch to try and go with them in the first place. But still wouldn't say no to a Volvo. But when I've been looking around for my sister and my brother for cars, when I just kept my eye in to see what I could possibly get next, realistically, by the time I've put what I want on a Volvo, I could have probably saved £3,000, £4,000 by going with a Ford or a Seat or a Skoda. Or Suzuki with the Baleno, with how little that is at the moment. You know, why not? But I'm not averse to going back to that Mill Volvo, because the guy did wonders for me. And he was honest, he was open, it was so refreshing based on what my dad's experiences had been with Sesson Lata and Volvo, various Edmonds. Some of my dad's experiences were not that good. Mine with Mill were very good. My dad's had reasonable experiences with Sesson Lata. There have been some that aren't very good, although sometimes he's a very difficult man to please. And there are some occasions where Sesson Lata, when you've looked at it, it's like, you're a professional organisation. You should have spotted this long before it's gotten to whatever point it's gotten to. Guys are always pretty friendly. I went there a lot when I was a child. Whenever my dad went looking at a car, I did a day's work experience with the sales manager when I was in year 9. They're all pretty good. They bring cars out to my dad to test drive when he needs them. Because he needs to have an automatic, they try where they can to make sure they give him an automatic courtesy car. Doesn't always happen, because obviously it's a first come first served basis, but they do what they can. They've given him SE Lux Sport V40s before for courtesy cars, when his was only an S, or the other end of the specification spectrum, basically. So they've always done pretty good. My dad mentioned when he bought a blue 440 from M.R. King and Sons of Framlingham. He bought a Volvo from there, and he said that the guy there it was just obvious the guy was trying to hit his sales target. Didn't really care what Dad wanted. Could have talked him into an S40. Could have talked him to a better 440. The guy just didn't care, apparently. And they also made a monumental mess up. So when it wasn't until Dad was halfway home that he realised that his number plate wasn't actually correct. It's a private plate, and they put a completely wrong letter in the wrong place. So it wasn't actually his car. So I think technically it was registered with the right plate, but it had the wrong one displaying. So there we are. So he never went back to there again. There was a Volvo dealership in Spalding when we lived in Lincolnshire that my dad used quite a lot, but more because of convenience that they were the closest one. He never bought through them, but I think he got close. But ultimately, he had his pick when it came to cars, came to Volvo, because he'd been a good customer, very loyal one. I don't want to count how many of them he's had, but they did what they could. They tried what they could, especially when it came to trading in an old 940 Celebration, lovely beast of a vehicle. Ultimately, Sesson Lata got the business, but I think that was because Dad had cost Sesson Lata some business before, and he went with pilling. If I remember the story correctly, when my dad was looking at replacing his first S40, he wanted to go up to a 1.8 from the 1.6 he had, and Sesson Lata just couldn't match what pilling were offering. Granted, the pilling car was an XDEM and pre-registered, but they couldn't match it, basically. So I believe Sessenlata had to do some grovelling to get the business back, but it worked because my dad hasn't looked elsewhere since, really. He's kept his eye out, because why not? Especially with Volvo increasing their price points, because they want their slice of the Jaguar and the Lexus pie that is trying to take away from the Beamer and the Volkswagen and the Mercedes dominance of the automotive arena at the moment. But the Sessenlata guys have always been pretty nice. Like I say, the guy who often talks nice and frankly with my dad when he picks his car up, because my dad can't always drive in to go drop the car off for a service. Tells him ins and outs, things to look out for. So, like for instance, my dad's. I always thought my dad should have gone for a V40 a few years ago rather than staying with a V70. But the guy who took his car in for a service, because that had even been my dad's thought, maybe I need a V40 because the children aren't around anymore and so on and so forth. The S60 unfortunately was a bit too low for my dad. He'd always loved them, and so do I. They're gorgeous vehicles. The older style ones are just fantastic, as well as the old R's. But the guy said you'd be better off with the V70 because you'd have a better seat in it, which I have no doubt it is, because the V40 is a shorter vehicle. They can't put V70 seats in a V40. So, swings and roundabouts, but it's nice to be treated well. Likewise, the Ford dealership my dad's been to a few times. The first time he went, he wasn't feeling very well, quite very unwell. But he's been there 3 times, and they seem to have treated him quite well. Russ was telling me he drove across country in the 80s to buy a Ford Thunderbird Turbo Coupe. Coupe, should I call it, being Europe, but American Turbo Coupe. Got the cash out the bank, and the guy couldn't give him the car when he wanted it, so Russ stayed somewhere overnight, and then he got the car the next day. That was back in the 80s, but dealerships do what they can. They've got ultimately they're sales machines, and they have to do what they can. My experiences up until Volkswagen had been very limited, but I'd always seen mostly the good side of them. What's soured me a bit with the Volkswagen experience was the email exchanges we had. I probably might buy a Volkswagen again in the future, but I wouldn't go through a Lookers dealership, and especially not that one in Middlesbrough. I don't care if they got rid of their entire staff. The simple fact is, I associate that place with that screw up. Renault aren't clean on this either, and I'll explain why. When the VW fell through and the Volvo thing had gone on, I got that out of work early one day because, well, I was owed a lot of hours. I put a lot of extra in, and I've done a lot of swaps without taking loo days. So I've done a lot of 6-day weeks. 5-day week, obviously. I've done a lot of 6-day weeks without a loo day in the middle. And my manager knew I'd had problems moving into new flats. So she, when possible, she tried to put me to the top of the what we call the early leavers list. Anyone who works in a call centre, early leavers, fantastic thing, unless you're on the late shift, because then you never get them. Or if you do a certain skill set, then you never get them because you're a priority man. I got let home early, and I thought, because my manager had let me home early quite a few times, I'd always put them to good use those days. So, for instance, there was one day before I moved into our old flat, the one with the purple living room. The neighbour upstairs had broken lots of, caused water damage. I had to repaint things and fix things, which then cost me time on getting everything else done. However, I then, with one afternoon that she gave me off, I'd been able to bring myself back on schedule where I should have been. But after moving in, I was given this afternoon. I'd been given, I think I finished at 1 o'clock, there or thereabouts. So I said, well, Suzuki's not far away. Why don't we go to them? When I went to Suzuki, I was met with. I started poking around the Swift with Sarah. Guy who dealt with us, he was probably about my sort of shape, i.e. not in shape, quite a blob. Probably, for some dealerships, probably not the sort of guy you want to wheel out. Tie was a little bit askew and things like that. But, he was a nice guy. I don't care if your tie's a bit askew, top button's undone, because I don't know how bad of a day he's had. He might have been shouted at by the sales manager all day and might have just wanted to cry, for all I know. Don't think he did, but, you don't know what's going on. So, he talked us through the Swift. He mentioned the Celerio. Was it Celerio that was out? Was it the Alto? We didn't want anything smaller than the Swift, basically. we said we'd ideally like 5 doors and air conditioning and so on. And he was like, yep, sure, it's fine. You might be he offered me a bit of advice and said you might be better off without those, to see whether you even want to stay with the Suzuki after your first, because you might just want to pay it off and get rid of the car, which was more than fair. Actually, in between this, I'd also been to Fiat in Stockton, and I was treated with massive indifference, to be honest, which was a shame, which is a surprise, because it's also an Alfa Romeo dealership. And it was also a Chrysler dealership, and a Jeep dealership, and a Saab one. So strange. But anyway, the guy, I'd explained my difficulties, I'd explained my financial situation, and he said he offered something. I should have thought of it myself, but being new to it, I hadn't even crossed my mind for this. He said, "Well, you know what's probably happened? It's an issue of badge." I was like, "What do you mean an issue of badge?" Like, well, VW holds quite a bit of weight, even if it is just a Polo. It's still Volkswagen. He's seen it before because he apparently used to work at Fiat and Alfa over in Stockton years ago. He said he'd seen it before. People couldn't get, even though the Fiat car was almost, or the Alfa car was almost the same size as what you get at Fiat. Alfa turned people down because it had a prestige to maintain. It had an image to maintain. Or they made it more difficult because, you know, we're Alfa Romeo, we'll do this. We're Volkswagen and we shall do this. So, you know, was quite interesting. He took my driving license things and explained he was going to keep holding my driving license to make sure I came back with the Swift, and just didn't do it. Just didn't do one, the one they gave us to test drive. Sarah whacked her head quite hard on the door when she tried to get in the back to see if we could manage with just the 3-door. Gave herself quite a migraine, to be honest. I didn't realise she'd hit her head that hard, but there we go. So I took the Swift out for a drive. I didn't know my way around Middlesbrough very well driving. I could tell you where to go on foot, no problem. Driving was another thing entirely. So I didn't get a chance to get it up to 50, 60 miles an hour. I wish I had, because I might have thought twice. But then again, most of my drive to work, I was at 50 miles an hour for 3-4 minutes, and then back down to 30. So in many ways, actually it wasn't a bother. I wasn't exactly becoming a motorway driver in the first instance. So after we went for the drive, came back to the dealership on Martin Road, and said, yeah, well, we'll see what we can do. Before we even went through any of the sales stuff, the guy gave me his tablet and said, see if you can get an insurance quote first, because you might not be able to get insured. VW never did that. Renault never did that. Fiat never entertained that idea. The Ford and Skoda dealerships that I'd emailed and got nothing back said nothing. Volvo said nothing. The guy at Suzuki said, see if you can get insured first. Okay, that was a good move, very good move. It turned out I could. He then explained the sales process and everything. Went into the sales office to do a bit of finance paperwork, and he walked me through it step by step. Explained the diamond brakes, offered the chips and scratch insurance and the hubs insurance. He said because it's an entry level car, you don't really need to worry about the hubs because you're running on steels and they're just covers. So I was like, yep, fine, I'll agree with you, I'll do what you tell me. You're the one who's experienced here, not me. So we did that. And then they went above and beyond on that one. He then sorted out the insurance for me to have his company Swift for 2 days while someone went up to Durham to get mine and do the diamond brake treatment on it. Like, who else would give you their company car to go away with for a couple of days? Fantastic. Gave me a couple of days learning to drive to work and how to get there, because again I'd never driven that way before, so I couldn't have told you how to do it. Couldn't at the time. Now the Swift I bought was an SZ2, so it's about as basic as you could get. I think the only option it had on it, the only luxury it had on it was a CD player, a USB slot, and electric wing mirrors. But the engine was nice, the gearbox felt nice. Ultimately, it was mine. That was probably the big thing. I don't care whose car it is. It's mine. So I said 2 days later, went back, got my car. Now, the only downside I felt, but this is because Cess and Larta Volvo have always given me Dad a full tank of petrol, at least left him with half a tank of petrol on all the cars he's bought. Can't comment what it's been like on the Fords he's bought, but Suzuki didn't. I got about a quarter of a tank of petrol with it. It was practically empty. But, that said, with everything else they'd done, I wasn't too bothered. It was one of those things like, this has been so good, that would have been the cherry on top, but you know what? it's only a Swift. You know, I could expect that a full tank of petrol if I bought a Volvo S80 or V70. Like, you've spent a lot of money on this, or BMW 3.5 Series. 3 Series or 5 Series, it's not a 3.5 Series. Well, I'm going to patent that so BMW can't make a 3.5 Series limo. So yes, I ultimately, it's like, well, it's only a little super mini, it doesn't really need to come with a full tank of petrol. So, you know, didn't bother me that much. Filled it up, went to work, job done. Fantastic. A couple of days later, this is where the Renault thing comes back in. A couple of days later, the guys at Renault called me and said, what do you want to do about the Clio? Because we can get you one at the dealership for in 2 days, or something like that. And given it had to come from somewhere like Somerset or Middlesex, somewhere a long way down south, they said we could get it up here in 2 days for you. I said, well, I've just bought a car now. When you buy a car on PCP, personal contract purchase, like most things, you have about 5 or 7 days in which you can just return the car and pay the interest for the days that you've had the car, basically, and cancel the finance. So I was in that time phase with the Swift. So I said to Renault, I was like, well, I've bought a Suzuki now, and what can you do, because I'm paying $149 a month. I didn't tell them it was an SZ2 that I'd bought, but to be honest, I don't think Renault would have offered me a particularly high-spec vehicle in the first place. They probably would have given me the most basic one, and that would have been that. The advantage with the Clio would have been 5 doors, a bigger boot. I probably wouldn't have needed to change it when I changed the Swift. So I said, well, I only put down £150 deposit, and I'm paying £149 a month. He goes, yeah, we could do that. Okay. I then started to tell a couple of white lies here. More because I started to feel like I'd been made a monkey of. So I wanted to see where I could push it. So I then said, okay, well, they've also given me 2 years free servicing. Yeah, we can do that. So I was sat there thinking, you lying? I would have normally said the full word there, but because people at Stoneacre might eventually say this, I'll keep my gob shut. So I then said, well, they've also given me 6 months free insurance as well. I went, oh, we can't do that. So then I was like, sorry, no, I'm not. Well, I've got a better deal with Suzuki anyway. And rang off. The guy at Renault never called me again, but I felt like a monumental monkey at that point. They told me they could do me the Clio for $194, and that was about as much as they could do. And then to call me a couple of days later and say, we can do the Clio for about $149 with your £150 deposit. What? However, the only caveat I can say to that as to why he might have suddenly been able to do it is if they were below their sales targets, they might have been able to say, well, slash £5,000 off that to get to buy. You know, they might have been able to do something to that in that order to make me buy. But I'm glad I stayed with Suzuki because I've always had a good experience with them. I've always had a little bit of banter with the guys in the dealership and the girls on the service desk as well. When I took my car in for its 2,000 mile check, I was offered a courtesy car, but because I only lived a 20-minute walk away, like, I need the exercise, I'll just come back. Just tell me when it's done and I'll come back. So that one all went perfectly fine. Got videos of it every single time. I'll probably insert a couple of them into here. So yeah, they did that. That was fine. When I had a problem with my Swift, I had a problem engaging reverse gear in it. It just sometimes would not go in, no matter how hard you pressed on the clutch, or if you put it back into neutral, clutch on, clutch off, and then back into reverse. Sometimes it just wouldn't do it. I'd also had occasions where it would just judder, like it was always telling me to change up one more gear. So rather than doing 30 and third, which is what you're taught in your driving lesson, it was telling me to go 30 and fourth, and then it would tell me to go into fifth. But there are occasions when I put it into 30 and fourth, the car then started going, and I couldn't work out what it was. And the guys at the dealership couldn't work out what it was either. So they said, nothing, the computer hasn't logged a fault on the computers. The cars hasn't logged a fault on its computer, sorry. We're not entirely sure. We couldn't replicate the fault. It's like, you know what, it doesn't matter. It might just be my driving style. But I thought I'd bring it in just to make sure. Didn't get charged for that diagnostic, probably because if there was something wrong, it would have been their fault. But still. And then when I took it in for its... Actually, I didn't even take it in for its first service, because it had been replaced by then. There was another one where Sarah and I were beginning to think, actually, should we miss out the Baleno and just go up to an S-Cross? And then I wouldn't need to change the car at all. And plus, we knew we were possibly going to have to move. So that car would have just then doubled up practically as a van, almost, for a lot of stuff. When we went and had a look at this S-Cross, again, we'd only intended to be an hour and a half at the most. We were there for hours, about 4 hours in total. I felt so bad saying, well, we can't afford it now. They did and moved everything they could, but I test drove an S-Cross with the booster jet engine that I'd wanted to test drive on the Baleno about 7-8 months before. It went pretty quick in that S-Cross, and the S-Cross is quite a big car. So if I thought Mikey's Ford was a lot to move, the S-Cross was even more for it to move. The S-Cross that I wanted to drive, because I said, do you want to try the 1.4 things? No, I want to try the 1 litre. I might have been a bit stubborn, but I was like, no, I want to try the 1 litre, because I spend most of my time commuting a few miles. I don't need the bigger engine. And if I have to do any motorway driving, I'll have to suck it up. So the only one they had with the booster jet on it, the booster jet I wanted, because they do a 1.4 and a 1.6, but the 1 litre booster jet I wanted was in the showroom, at the very back. So they moved their desks out the way, pushed cars out the way to get this S-Cross out for me to test drive. And that was fantastic. It's like, I feel so bad, because a bit of me was going, I might have to buy the car just to make up for them having to move everything around. Then we went for the test drive. It was really nice. They tried to get us into sale. It was like, ultimately, the money was just not there. It would have meant refinancing negative equity. The car didn't have things on it I wanted. Like, I wanted either the reversing camera or parking sensors. But, they were really nice, super friendly. I couldn't fault them. Then March time came, March last year, and it's bonus time for me in the company I work at. We get paid our bonuses in March. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to go have a look at Suzuki again. Went round to Stoneacre. My sister had visited. She'd visited on the Thursday into the Friday morning. I said to her when I dropped at the train station Friday morning, like, next time you visit, it probably won't be this red Swift that sat here. Because that was kind of how sure I was going to have a different car. I wasn't determined to replace it. It was just a case of if they can do me something good. So I went back in. My Swift hadn't earned money as such, but it hadn't lost as much money as they thought it was going to lose. In fact, it sort of levelled itself out. It finished off about £1,532, I think, was the negative equity I had in the Swift. They ran the numbers for me against a Baleno and an S-Cross. I didn't care about the colour of the paint. As long as it's not pink or yellow, I don't mind. I'm fine with the flat red because it's free. That's why my Swift was red. I'm fine with my Baleno being white because the white is free. The Baleno doesn't actually talk about it. The Baleno doesn't look very good in red, and I don't know why. I'm kind of pleased I got the white one, but anyway, they did everything they could. Sarah was cross with me because I've been out all day virtually. I think I've been out since about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So I was out 5-6 hours by the time I got home. But in that time, they'd talked me through everything. We paid the deposit. My car was basically the Swift stopped being mine. I just had to bring the V5 in for when they did the Diamond Bright on the Baleno, and that was so good. It was unbelievably good. I mean, admittedly, I'm paying more than I should be for my Baleno. There's not a lot I can do about that. That's not Stoneacre's fault. It's because I had to refinance that £1,532. So actually, I started off £1,532 in the hole. If you take out my £500 deposit, it's actually £2,032 in the hole. I think I started off at. So it's fine. I mean, I got some money from an inheritance later in the year that I knew was coming, but it was a case of Sarah and I were getting fed up with the Swift being doors were so big. If anyone's had a C30, those doors on the C30 are enormous because of the shape of that car. The C30 doors are enormous because it's got to have the strength of 5, basically. And the Swift was a similar fashion. I mean, Mam said the doors are enormous when she got into it as a passenger once. I wasn't, I didn't like the size of the doors on it, basically. It meant that even the smallest parking space was suddenly quite tiny because I needed all that extra space to undo the doors. So the Baleno, I needed something with 5 doors. We'd gone through quite a hot summer with no air conditioning, and like, you know what? That was torture. We really needed aircon. Bigger boot. Our weekly shop was starting to have to be put on the back seat of the car because there were some weeks where we buy more because we've somehow used Hordes. It had to go on the back seat, and then you got the difficulty getting it back off the back seat with it being a 3-door car. So difficulty. So maybe I was a bit too soon with the Baleno. Maybe I should have tried to hold on another couple of months and see what they could have done for me in the June. But the Baleno I bought was in the showroom. So whilst I was doing the finance agreements, they screwed the number plates on for me, covered it over with a blanket, and then had to pull the blanket off for it. Again, I'll put the pictures in here for it. A couple of pictures were taken. I don't know if they ever made it onto Suzuki's not Suzuki, Stoneacre's website. Good if they did, not if they didn't. I don't care. I was like, you know what, you've done a good deal for me. Yeah, I'll pose next to. I think it's handover day is what they call it on the Facebook page. Happy handover day. Or that was just starting. So you know, I couldn't fault them for it. And again, when I took the car back in about 2-3 days later for the diamond brake treatment, one of the guys gave me his own company car. It was a Suzuki Jimny, and made my mind up never to buy one of those myself ever. Having driven his, not because of what his was like, but it was an automatic. It was a 4x4. I'd never driven anything that big or automatic before, and on both fronts. But they've been really good. And when I took it in for actually no, I did take my Swift in for a service. I had a Celerio. But they've always been really good. And then a few months after I bought my Baleno, I got my sister over to Stoneacre to have a look and see what we could do. I was going to see if she could buy a car like mine, buy a Baleno. But, you know, there was a Swift, the new Swift had just come out, the Ignis had come out as well. So she had quite a few options that she could have had. She had nothing to trade in, so obviously she was starting off on the back foot. But they talked to us, because she'd initially gone to buy a used car. They explained that the higher interest rates on used cars, you might as well buy a new one, save a bit of interest, and the car a bit sooner. Which, to be honest, I didn't know that myself. Thinking about it, it's like, actually, that makes sense, but didn't think to enter my mind in the first instant. They gave her, granted it was a hybrid, but they gave her a Swift to test drive for a while. We looked at a Swift, and I said to the generation of Swift I just got rid of, but again they said, well, because that's now the old style, Suzuki now classes that as a used car, so you're going to be paying the higher interest on it. She's got a very good Swift for what she's paying. She's paying below £200 a month for it. It's a solid little car. Doors are maybe a bit lighter than I would like, and can't get used to the shape myself. Maybe I could if I had to live with the car all the time, but then again I also had the cuter front-ended Swift that was a little bit nicer. But again, they went above and beyond, and someone went to the compound where the Swifts were kept to go pick it up that same day. They said, come back in a couple of hours, go get yourself some lunch. We'll sign some paperwork. In those 2 hours, we'll get the car, wash it, hoover it, give it the diamond bright treatment, and you'll be all set. And they did. Fantastic. Again, it didn't come with an awful lot of petrol in it, so she needed to fill the tank. But unbelievable. I've driven that little Swift once, but it was all pretty good. The only downside I've ever had with Stoneacre, it's really a tiny fault. It's not. It's one of these ones people go, oh, grow up, which, you know, I would, but I like my cars, so, you know. Is when I've gone for a service with the Swift and the Baleno, I've been given a Celerio for a courtesy car. And the Celerio, I don't know if it's because of how round I am or my height, probably more to do with the round than the tall, to be honest. I couldn't get in it very well. The most recent one, I couldn't get in it very well. It still had manual wing mirror adjustments. It's like, this is 2018 and it's manual still. They'd improved the Celerio over where it was, because the first one I drove, it couldn't at second gear and 30 miles an hour. Third gear at 30 miles an hour, it was almost stalling because it just couldn't seem to cope. Whereas this one had been fixed a bit, had itself redone. But second gear felt awful. The brakes were like sponge. The wheel felt like a 1990s Rover. It was awful. But besides that, it was all good. Had a bit of a banter with the lady from the sales desk afterwards. Like, why is this Celerio so awful when Suzuki makes such good cars like the Baleno and the Swift and the S-Cross and the Ignis? Like, do you really need this little scourge on your record? It's like I feel exactly the same. But anyway, my experience with Stoneacre has always been fantastic, and I'd highly recommend the Stoneacre in Middlesbrough. I mean, I got 50 quid for recommending my sister. So I mean, if you really want to go there and say someone recommended you, say I recommended you, if you would like. But the whole point about buying a new car, it's all about the experience with the dealership. You could buy a dog of a car, you could buy the most perfect car, but if your experience with the dealer is awful, then you're never gonna that car's experiences your experience of that car is always going to be blemished by what it was like with that dealer. It doesn't matter what you buy, what brand, what manufacturer. Don't be afraid to change, as in don't be afraid to go from Volvo to BMW or Jaguar to Volvo or Ford to Suzuki, Suzuki to Hyundai. Don't be afraid to go between manufacturers if your finance options enable you to do so. Just take your time. If you're being pushed, tell them to step away, or make it without being awful to them. Make it obvious, like, sorry, you're making my buying experience uncomfortable. I don't want to be pushed. Take your time. If you have to go, look, sorry, I've got to go. I've got to leave. Then that's fine. Or even if it's a case of telling the person that did it, do you mind if can you get me a cup of coffee or a cup of water? Then give yourself a little bit of a barrier. But find a dealer. If you like him a lot, don't be afraid to return to them multiple times. I will put Stoneacre Suzuki at the top of my list for my next car. At the moment, unless Suzuki, I'm not planning to change my car ahead of schedule, unless Suzuki say, right, we can, or Stoneacre, whoever makes the calls on what they can and can't do, whoever contacts me to say we might be able to do you a deal, I'll listen, but I don't think they'll be able to do anything about my monthly payments. But assuming everything goes according to plan, the next car I buy will either be a Suzuki S-Cross, if it's still in existence then, or whatever's replaced it, or a Ford Mondeo Estate. Because actually the Mondeo Estate's quite a funky shaped car and cheaper than a Focus when I last looked. Food for thought. This is probably, from memory, this will be the longest episode of Velocity Kinetics, but it had to be said. I couldn't break it down. But that's all we've got time for today. Remember to drive safe. Be careful in this heat whilst you're driving, because the heat can get quite tiring, make you feel quite close. But also, because you'll probably more likely have your air conditioning on, make sure you've got enough petrol and don't run out. Get involved on the Everyone Wants to Get Home hashtag and hashtag build an F1 team. We'll see what other people have done, and we'll see you later.
Velocity Kinetics has been made in association with Road Race Parts. Top quality, best prices, no compromise. Head to roadraceparts.com to get parts for your racing vehicles now.